I'm really thrilled to be here this morning. I give a lot of talks, a lot of speeches. I facilitate a lot of rooms. I have to tell you, most of them are full of really angry people. So I'm counting on the fact that that won't be some of you this morning, at least until after I'm done. That would be really great. I heard Bruce was taking polls last night, so here's a poll for you. Did anyone get pooped on by a seagull yesterday? Show of hands, anybody? Just me, then. Just me. Welcome to Victoria. So, thank you so much. I'm told it's good luck, so I'm going to go with that. I want to start here. In 25 years of doing engagement work, in mostly spaces of high conflict and high emotion, I learn every day, every project, that there is more I have to learn. The more I do this work, the more I realize I have fewer answers than I did before, particularly as our environment and our society and our system changes. There is one thing I know for sure, that brave, honest conversations are how we solve the problems in our worlds. And when I say worlds, I mean in our communities, in our organizations, and in our families, in our lives. That's one of the only things I know for sure about this practice. I think we do a really beautiful job in IAP2 of celebrating our successes. I've been lucky enough to be involved in a couple of projects that have been International Core Values Awards winners, and I'm honored to have worked on them. But I don't think we spend enough time talking about our challenges or our failures, and the brave, honest conversations we need to have about really, just excuse the adult language, when shit hits the fan, when stuff goes sideways, when things become incredibly messy. So I want to take this opportunity this morning for us to start thinking about how do we learn from our failures? Maybe how do we redefine failure as learning? I'm going to get you to, since this is a participation conference, I'm going to get you to turn to your neighbor or have a conversation at your table, just a quick one, 2 minutes. What do you fear in your engagement work? You plan a meaningful process. What do you worry could go wrong? What do you lie awake at night and, fear when you walk into a room of a couple hundred people who really care about an issue? So I'll give you a minute at your tables. Okay, folks, I'm going to pull you back. There's not much I love more than the buzz of a room full of people talking. But I'd like to hear what kind of things came to the forefront. What kind of things bubbled up? Just yell them out. What do you fear? Yeah, so missing an audience that you need to speak with. What else are you afraid of? Sponsor integrity. Yeah, like whether the client or the project proponent is really doing it in good faith, really believes in hearing the voice of people. What else? Mayhem. Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's so common. That's actually the answer I hear most, is that what happens when you lose the room or you lose the process or everything goes sideways and the conflict just erupts. So I think, the theme of this conference is building a culture of engagement. And I think we need to get real about what it takes to build a culture of engagement. When I picture what is a culture of engagement, what does it create, I think about people having really tough conversations about the stuff that really matters most, and doing it in ways where there is deep disagreement and deep difference of views, and still working through it and figuring a way forward that takes everyone with them, where there's not winners or losers. There probably are unicorns and rainbows in that world as well, and some sprinklings of fairy dust. I think sometimes we think if we write a policy or a guideline or a framework or we legislate engagement, well, then we'll have that happy place where people are happy. Or sometimes we think if we do more engagement, quantity, we'll get where we're going. We'll have that culture of engagement where people can really talk together about places where there's a big space between them and totally different views. I think we need to have some tough conversations about what it really takes to build a culture of engagement, and so I want to share a story. A story not of success, a story of challenge and failure. I'm a really firm believer we learn so much more from those things than we do from our successes. And this story woke me up to the realities of the space that we work in and the kind of work we do and the way we practice. So it's been a really interesting journey over the last couple of years. Now, some of you might know this story. Some of you might have even heard me tell it. I want to offer that you probably haven't heard me tell it like this, with a little bit more courage and a little bit more truth to my own experience in this story. So this is a story from 5 years ago. In 2013, I ran a consulting firm called Dialogue Partners. We were hired by the city of Hamilton, Hamilton, Ontario. It's a municipality just in the Golden Horseshoe. And in Hamilton, they have a declining tax base and crumbling infrastructure. And they decided it was time to have a conversation with citizens about the municipal and the operating budgets. And if you know the IAP2 spectrum, they chose collaborate. They were going to work in partnership with citizens to figure out all the tough decisions that had to be had. Like, how were they going to move forward on, we're going to close ice rinks and swimming pools so we can fix potholes, right? Not easy decisions, not how do we get more ice time and more swimming pools and better parks, but how do we get less of and make do? We spent 9 months planning the engagement process, 9 months. We boiled down the municipal and the operating and capital budgets into infographics and videos and workbooks. We created online games and board games and deliberative forums and workbooks. There was training for city staff and planned training for community members so they could host their own conversations. Now, a thing to know about Hamilton is that they have a very small but very active Twitter community. And it's the joys of engagement. And the people who are in this very small but active group, they wanted to lead this conversation. They'd been advocating for this conversation to happen, and they wanted to lead it. So we launched the process on Monday, January 7th. That day will be burned forever in my brain. It's a day I drink an entire bottle of wine every year just to commemorate the event. And by launched, we made the Facebook page live and the Twitter feed live and all the online tools. Partway through the day, one of my team members was asking questions like, what city services make a difference in your life? And one individual responded with a series of 4 or 5 tweets. And so when you're doing engagement, you harvest the data, right? A tweet is data, and 4 or 5 tweets is a viewpoint or a perspective. And so to clarify what he was talking about, he mentioned HSR. Now, she knew HSR was the Hamilton Street Railway. That's their transit system. But she wanted to be sure she got it right, and somehow along there he didn't make reference to something else. So she said, just to clarify for the record, what is HSR? It was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. And so this community all of a sudden turned around, this small Twitter community, and said, hold on a second, who the heck is behind this Twitter feed? Why don't they know anything about Hamilton? How do they not know what HSR is? And so they launched a campaign. It was funny in the beginning. They launched a hashtag that was Tell Our Voice, Our Hamilton, that's the name of the project, everything. Like everything we didn't know about Hamilton, but we should know. Like there were tweets like, Hamilton has a King Street, but not a Queen Street, but Queens are welcome here. And, and so if it wasn't my project, it was highly amusing. But it was my project. It trended nationally. And then participants, citizens who were trying to respond to questions, they started shouting at each other and bullying each other and saying, don't talk to these people, we want them gone. And the conversation became about Dialogue Partners, and it became about me personally. Let's get rid of these people so we can have the conversation. The media covered all of it. It was a shit show. And that was day 1 of the project. So When I'm thinking about what does it take to build a real culture of engagement, I decided to go with an acronym you can remember, REAL, the word real. And for me, the very first pillar of it is responsibility. Now, we have core value number one. The public has a right to have a say about issues that matter to them. I want to invite you to just consider that that's insufficient in the world we live in. That they must have a right. I will go to war. Well, I probably won't literally go to war, but I will figuratively go to war to protect that right. But I think people need to also have a responsibility, a right to a voice and a responsibility to understand their neighbors' views, to move forward thinking about the collective good. I think we as practitioners need to advocate, empower, and inspire participants to access that responsibility. Sure, come with your righteous indignation and your anger and your fear and tell me what you want, and then tell me how we reconcile that with what your neighbors need too. So that responsibility, I think, needs to be enshrined in our practice, and we need to support our participants to find that responsibility, not just their right to a voice, but their responsibility to their fellow neighbors. I also think as I practice over the years, I always ask, well, what does success look like? And more than any other comment I hear, people want to be heard. If they've been heard, then we know we'll have done something well. I want to offer that that's not enough. When people feel heard, that's great. Oftentimes they're calmer. They vented a little bit. Maybe they feel like they were listened to. But then, so what? Doesn't mean they're part of the solution, doesn't mean they're committed to positive change, doesn't mean they're respecting or listening or considering their neighbors' views. I think we need to take the be heard out of our lexicon and our language and instead be understood, be part of the solution, be part of the collective answer to this challenge that we face. So that's the R in responsibility. I think responsibility is crucial because outrage is here to stay. It's not a fad that just shows up on a couple of people's projects. I think it is now part of the society that we live in. Outrage and opposition are part of how we operate. And I want to invite you to maybe think about how do we redefine success. Over the years, I have heard from so many practitioners that success is if we really plan a meaningful engagement process and we implement the decisions that get made and we move forward and we only have a couple of people who are outraged or upset, then we've got a successful process. What if outrage and opposition are our new norms? Maybe we can define success as what do we do with the outrage we face, not whether we have it or not. Having outrage or opposition doesn't mean you're not successful. It means that's the space we're working in. That's the culture that we're working in. And so redefining success to be, we've got challenges, we have tensions, we have conflict. How do we work with that instead of manage it, control it, or move forward despite it? So I'm going to go back to that story because I only told you about day one. So over the next couple of days, malware was installed on the website, so we had to shut it down. I'm sure it was a coincidence. I'm sure that was a coincidence. We were using Pinterest, and pictures of Hamilton, Ohio were posted, not Hamilton, Ontario, and we were accused. In fact, it was a front page article in the Hamilton Spectator that we had posted pictures of Hamilton, Ohio, so we didn't know where Hamilton was. The online games were hacked, so that in one of them that said, what city services make a difference to your life, the only answer you could vote on were fire dialogue partners and hire Joey so-and-so. It's the only answer you could provide. There was an article in the Toronto Star about how we were hiding out, the dialogue partners team was hiding out in a Toronto hotel, afraid to come to Hamilton. Not true, but awesome article with no retraction, because the source was Twitter. Participants started to go silent because they were being bullied every time they tried to participate in the conversation. And if I believe with my heart and soul that brave, honest conversations are how we solve the problems in the world, then I was failing them because The loudest folks were drowning out the quietest ones who actually wanted to be in the conversation. We had to shut down the Facebook page because anyone who had actually tried to participate was being shouted at and called names by other people. We were partners with the City of Hamilton, so both of our names were on the project. So like Dialogue Partners as the neutral third party and the City of Hamilton. And our partner advocated that we be silent, that we not say anything. So on day 3, this is all just in 3 days. It's trending nationally across the country. It's in the National Post. On day 3, we had a team meeting and said, I don't think this is working. Pretty sure, just going by how things are moving along, this isn't working very well. So let's try something different. So we decided silence wasn't the answer. So we took a full-page ad out in the Hamilton Spectator, a letter to citizens. First of all, we apologized because if you're responsible for the process, you're responsible for the process, even if you didn't post the pictures of Hamilton, Ohio. We acknowledged all the mistakes and missteps, and then we really advocated and invited people to be in the conversation because this was their city. And these were tough decisions that needed to be made, and if they weren't going to be part of it, who was going to be part of it? This was a conversation they had been asking for years, finally had been given it, and you know, we're being shouted down, we're being shut down. We wrote an open letter to council as well, and then we were advised on the Friday, 5 days after the project started, like some of the longest days of my entire life, that council was going to hold a special meeting on Monday to talk about what to do about the project. And I should request to be a 5-minute delegation. You know, when you go to council, you get your 5 minutes, the very formal process. So I filed my request to be a 5-minute delegation for Monday's meeting, and I flew down there. And it wasn't 5 minutes. I'll tell you that. It was hours. And it was televised, so that was even more awesome. And that's me standing and being grilled and being called names and being told I was incompetent, I had no capability, I had no credibility. I obviously just started this practice, had no idea what I was doing, you know, that my kindergarten child would be better at this than you are, and all of it for hours and hours. After that, council went into closed session, and they came out, made an offer to us through city staff, and in the offer they said, we would like you to continue this project. We would like you to implement this process that you planned, but we would, and these are the words that were used, we'd like to throw a bone to the folks who are outraged. And so we want you to do it for half price. I love that. I love that response. Thank you. Thank you for being outraged. Thank you. So lots of conversation in our team, and we came back and said, no, we're out. 2 reasons. Number 1, we're not neutral anymore. And there are people who will not come to the table because it's us. And number 2, what does that say about the value of citizen input? What does it say about the value of engagement if we're going to do it for half price? Now, those are the facts of the project, but I want to share a little bit about the feelings. You know, it was an incredible crisis of confidence. I had been doing this work for 20 years, always in the spaces of conflict and high emotion. And suddenly I came back to, oh my God, who am I? And what do I stand for? And do I have any credibility or any capability? I have to tell you, as a practice, it was a really challenging experience because I had a lot of colleagues and friends who reached out and said, hey, I can't be associated with you anymore. I can't do business with you anymore because of this. You know, this is a really big mess. It really was a lot of soul searching. There was a lot of wine and chocolate and walks in the woods, but there was an awful lot of like, what do I stand for? And also, what does it say about the space that we're engaging in, where it's full of blame and shame and vitriol, and also not a conversation as a community about challenge or failure or anything else. So it was a really rough ride, which leads me to this work we do is not for the faint of heart. This work we do, it requires great courage to meet people where they're at with their anger and their fear and their grief and their hardship and their anxiety, to meet them where they're at and to stand for something. It requires great courage, I think. So I just want to applaud each and every one of you who do this work every day, or are so committed and invested to the conversation, that you're brave. You're really brave. Which leads me to the E in the real, let's get real, embracing the emotion, which is so much easier to say than it is to do. So let's do a bit of a wave. I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. So I want you to think about how comfortable you are with other people's intense emotions. So just spend a minute thinking about that. You know, other people's anger, their outrage, their righteous indignation, their fear, their grief, their anxiety. And I want us to be really brave and honest about how comfortable we are. So I'm going to read out a series of numbers. And when I read out the number that reflects how comfortable you are with other people's intense emotions, I want you to sit down. So we're going to go on a scale of 1 to 5. I want to tell you that I've been doing this work for 25 years. Just to be really honest, I'm not a 5. So I'm not expecting the room to be standing when I get to 5, okay? Just to be honest. Number 1, you would rather run and hide under your desk. Oh, I don't believe you. There are some people in this room who would rather run and hide. Number 2, it feels pretty yucky, and it makes you really uncomfortable to deal with other people's intense emotion. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Number 3, it's not your favorite thing, but you can manage. Yeah. Number 4, it makes you optimistic that you're really getting to the real stuff that needs to be talked about. Nice. Okay, so who are our 5s? Put up your hand. 5 is it's the best day ever. We got a couple. Vince, Terry, Catherine, a few. It's really hard work. It requires an enormous amount of courage. Okay, so stand up again. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, a scale of 1 to 5. This time, I want you to consider how capable or able are you to have a conversation with other people when you are really emotional. Okay? Because it's always about everybody else, but turns out it's actually about you too. Okay? So number 1, you are a mess, and there is no way that's happening. We're not talking about our partners, right? Yeah, probably not your partners. Number 2, it makes you feel really off balance and sort of triggered, like you can't find a center and you can't really be in the conversation. Number 3, it's okay, but you find yourself mostly paying attention to your own internal dialogue rather than being in conversation with others. Yeah. Number 4, you're pretty okay to acknowledge your own feelings in the conversation you're having with somebody else. Nice. Are there any? Yeah, there's a couple of people still standing. That's beautiful. You're really comfortable being vulnerable. Nice. Let's just applaud those folks. Very nice. Very, very nice. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I think it's crucially important in building a culture of engagement that we bring our whole selves to the conversation. Not our neutral selves, not our third-party selves, not our facilitator practitioner selves, but actually all of us. The values that we hold, the stuff that matters most to us, that we meet people where they're at, because if I can feel my own pain and fear and anger, then I can see it in you, and I can be there for you in the conversation. But if I can't be in touch with my own shit, I sure can't be there for somebody else's. I think we need to have a different mindset to build a culture of engagement that's about being vulnerable, about stepping into our failures and our challenges and having real conversations about them. And you can't do that if you're trying to be perfect and always have it just be right. Which leads me to the A in the real culture of engagement. I think we need to create some new patterns of how we engage people. And this is where my friend Jeff Wilson sometimes calls me the Antichrist of IAP2. So here I am going to maybe throw that bomb in this room. I think it's time that we stepped away from having conversations about issues and having project-related discussions and just talked to people and built relationships. I think we need to move away from the big D decision about an issue, which is a right or a wrong or a yes or a no or this way or that way, and actually move to small conversations about the small D decision, like I choose to be in relationship with you, like I choose to trust you, like I choose to have a conversation with you, small D decisions. Once we've got relationships, then maybe we can talk about the projects. But when we start with the projects, even if we try and build relationship in the context of the project, we become single issue conversations. Should we build a pipeline? Yes or no? Let's all tie ourselves to trees and get out, or fences and get out on different sides of that issue. Let's instead have relationships so we can talk about the stuff that matters most, like how do we move forward as a society? I also think that if the new norm is outrage and opposition, it's time we stopped informing people. And we made our easy decisions, and we just made them. And we did all of our engaging at involve, collaborate, and empower. And we dropped the inform and consult off the spectrum. Because in a culture of outrage and opposition, it only breeds more outrage to decide for people or to just ask them to comment on what you're planning to do. I'll just let you breathe there for a minute. I'm just not sure if there's going to be some outrage in the room. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. And this is the L for building a real culture of engagement. I think that if there's two things I know for sure, I started with the first thing I know for sure, which is brave, honest conversations are how we solve the problems in our worlds. The second thing I know for sure is that the world needs a new kind of leader. One who stands for something, who shows up, and who leads from that place. And I believe really firmly that it starts with you. It starts with everyone in this room who's already committed and invested in real conversations and meaningful conversations, and that it is about your responsibility to step into that. And you showing up with your whole self, and you having really deep conversations about the tough stuff that matters most and leaving the easy stuff and already deciding it. And then taking a stand. Because the thing about leaders, and we are all leaders, is that leaders stand for something. And when you stand for something and you stand powerfully in that, you can't be blown off course. And that makes you not a practitioner or a facilitator or a neutral third party. That makes you somebody who stands for inclusion and respect and civil discourse and fairness. And when you lead from that, it's really hard to get blown off course. Really hard to get blown off course. So I'm going to ask you to turn to a partner and take a couple minutes and answer these questions. What do you believe about engagement? What are you committed to as an engagement leader? What do you stand for? So that when you stand in that, you won't be blown off course. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay, folks, I'm going to pull you back. So I'd like to hear from a couple of tables about what you stand for as a leader, what you believe in. So the beautiful Kim Hishka of Dialogue Partners has got a roving mic. Just turn it on, Kim. Yeah, it's on. So just put up a hand if you want to share your conversation with your partner, what you stand for as an engagement leader, what you believe.
Inclusion.
Thank you very much. And when you stand in that, if you stand in inclusion, it allows you to deal with people who are only one way or the other way, and in the space of the conversation to support that and call it out from people, and to draw a boundary with a generous heart that says, actually, we're in this together. And so let's have this conversation so that it reflects all of us. Vince.
Believe it or not, humility. Because my team, the client team, the stakeholder groups, the different people we're inviting, and we're inviting diverse groups around complex problems, all know something, and no one knows everything.
Yes.
And so we have to show and model humility, and that will lead to genuine insight and co-creation of solutions that work for more people than we could ever do on our own. And if you don't model humility at the same time as being bold and strong about what can happen, you lose that magic potential.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Absolutely. That's part of that bringing your whole self to the conversation. Thank you.
Guys, I'm going to get my 10,000 steps in here.
Neutrality?
Can you tell us more about that, Terry?
Well, being personally neutral on an issue, even though the public will know that we probably have an opinion as a resident ourselves, but being really as neutral as possible, sticking firm to that, keeping that neutral attitude, and not let our biases come out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Somebody else.
Dialogue is really the essence of finding this place where there's outrage happening. And I define dialogue as, I can now understand why you think the way you do. I don't agree with you, but I get it. And that capacity for us to create space for ourselves, but for others at the table, to empathize, will allow us to move from what we talked about as the dichotomy of winners and losers. Because undoubtedly, someone's going to be unhappy with the outcomes, but at least they can say, but I kind of understand why they made that choice. That's what we were talking about.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. What else?
This table, we all talked about what you said about relationship really resonated. So everybody felt, we have some people here, including myself, in very small rural communities where relationship is fundamental. If people don't know who you are and they don't actually regularly engage with you, it ain't gonna work. And there was also the word trust. And I also brought up something about IAP2, IABC, CPOS, all these organizations. We often, what you're talking about with relationship is fundamental to conflict resolution.
Yes.
And to the triangle of kind of relationship, process, content. I think sometimes we fall victim to our own silos of practice without looking into other disciplines who've already figured this out. So I think in that relationship, I'm editorializing here, but that relationship, we need to really look beyond our own area of practice and benefit from all the other fields who do this really well. And take some of those principles.
Thank you very much. Well, it's also the accessing the learning that's out there, not assuming because you've been practicing for however long you've practiced or you work in a particular sector that you have all the answers, because there is always more to be learned.
Thanks, Steph. That was a really inspiring talk. And just for the record, I don't really think she's the Antichrist of IAP2. So we talked a little bit about hope and about, particularly around the first question about the promise and possibility for real change that exists, I think, within engagement. And I, personally, if I don't have that, then I can't go on. So I need to hold that hope.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeff. We'll just go to Bruce up here, and then I think that'll be the last comment, and I'll continue on.
Thanks. The great Miles Horton talked about waves of social change, and they build up and they sweep you away. And so my word is stick with itness. I mean, you got to be in the game. Be in the game. It's a life commitment. We're not changing this. We're not going to singularly, create the wave. No. You've got to be ready and prepared, and you can't take it all on your back.
Yeah.
You know, it's not all about me or you or us. Engagement's not fixing the world all
No.
by itself.
No.
Got to do our job and stay with the plan.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Bruce. That sort of ability to just kind of ride the storm and stay with it in service to the conversation, in service to the people in the conversation. I think I've said outrage and opposition are here to stay. In order to build a real culture of engagement, I think we need to think from that perspective, that that's our new normal. I want to offer that maybe it's time we started thinking about dropping the public in public engagement. Because only focusing outside and external to us creates a space between us. It's us and them. It's government and public. It's corporation and public. It's practitioner and public. And if instead we just talked about the culture of engagement, how we talk together, how we have brave, honest conversations as a way of life, that this isn't just a thing you do for work, for a project, because you can sit with people who are angry or afraid or upset about particular impacts of a project, but you can have these conversations at your dinner table and in your organization and in your community, so they become a way of life, not just issue specific. I think if we focus on relationships, we take the big D decision out of our processes and we focus on the small d decision to choose to work with you, to choose to have a conversation with you, to choose to maybe trust you. And then we move to big D, rather than just being project by project basis. That it be about ongoing, how do we have relationships with our communities, in our organizations? I think the best work that we do in building a culture of engagement is a little bit like Susanna said, creating connection and possibility and empathy. It creates a sense of we're in this together, that the hope of solving problems is possible because we can have these conversations with each other. So when I was creating this, real acronym to kind of think through how do you build a real culture of engagement, I created a quiz actually to kind of assess your own individual contribution to building a culture of engagement. So you can access that quiz if you want to pull out your phones and text BRAVE to 867-992-2162. And you can get a copy of that quiz so that when you can't sleep tonight after you've drank too much, you can assess your contribution to a culture of engagement. I really want to invite you to step into your fear. I said earlier that this work is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the faint of heart. It takes real courage and humility and smattering of hope and a lot of empathy. But it also requires a mindset of not getting it perfect, of being willing to fail, being willing to step into challenges and have conversations about them in service to the learning that it creates, to the opportunity. Imagine if an engagement, it just became a norm to have conversations, and that if everything didn't go perfect, that was okay, that wasn't a failure, that was a success because we were talking, rather than it be a failure because things went sideways. I want to say I told the project of the City of Hamilton, but I to this day believe that project was a gift. It allowed me to assess my own practice. It allowed me to assess the culture that we work in. It allowed me to kind of go back to what I really stand for. And if you're looking at your practice, if you have bigger ideas you want to implement, if you want to stretch and innovate, I want to encourage you to go to the Dialogue Partners booth over the next couple of days, because they're going to offer coaching, 15-minute coaching sessions over the next couple of days to work with you to find your big ideas. What do you want to step into and access? And because I believe so strongly that brave, honest conversations are how we solve the problems in our worlds, I wanted to provide some gifts to the folks in the room. So at not at every table, at 45, we counted, I think this morning, 45 tables in this room, there is a chair at each of those 45 tables with my business card stuck underneath it. And I have created conversation cards, like decks of cards. Brave, honest conversations at the dinner table. Everyone's now distracted looking under their chairs. Brave, honest conversations at the dinner table. Brave, honest conversations at the boardroom table. And brave, honest conversations with yourself. So if you happen to be the person who's got the card, you can go to the Dialogue Partners booth and pick a pack of cards just to continue the conversation in your organization or in your family with yourself. Thank you. Thank you very much.